Hello artists and welcome to day 117 of the epic journey. I'm Dalene FM and today we're going to be looking at hatching, both plain hatching and cross hatching. Now of course with hatching we need to start off with some sort of plotted out drawing, so I'm just quickly whizzing through the plot. We will look at this in a different tutorial. I'm simply rendering the outlines of the drawing at this point to get it ready for the hatching process. So hatching is one of those techniques that have been around since the Middle Ages and has been used by all the old masters and everybody since, and I think it's something that every artist should explore, even if they don't use it in their day-to-day drawing. One should explore it because it actually is not as easy as it looks. In fact, I find it a lot more difficult than some of the other techniques that we use. So when I start the hatching process, I'm going to choose a direction. For me, it's pretty logical to go at a 45-degree angle-ish from left to right because I'm right-handed. I would find it quite difficult to go in a direction away from me, say from right to left at a 45-degree angle going upwards. I would find that incredibly awkward. But this sort of left to right at a 45-degree angle kind of suits the way that I'm holding the pencil. Now the direction that you choose would simply be the direction that you're most comfortable with. I think this left to right 45-degree angle is, most drawings are drawn that way. It's probably because it's the most comfortable way to hold the pencil, and it does help to create a relatively parallel line. Now you'll see in this drawing sometimes my lines are not always at the same angle and they cross a little bit, and that's just lack of practice, I guess. But it does take some getting used to. I think the part that I probably find the most difficult is at the beginning of the line. You place your pencil and you draw a line, and you come back to the same spot, you place your pencil and you draw a line, and you do that repeatedly at sort of mid-speed, so to speak. I mean, I've kept this footage slow so that you can see the speed at which I'm drawing. It's really not fast. It's not like speed drawing. And a lot of the reason for that is because where you place your pencil to start your line, particularly when it's at a finite point, has got to be a little bit accurate, because you'll see in some other parts of the drawing I've got to actually go up and tidy up a little bit because the lines are not sort of meeting up, so to speak, so you get this kind of jaggedy edge. So I think that's probably for me the most difficult part of hatching, but it does come with practice. I'm starting off with an HB pencil, and I'm just allowing the direction of the line to be the natural movement of my arm in most cases. There's some little areas where I've actually got to go and be a little bit more careful, but generally speaking it's the natural movement of my arm as I'm using my elbow as my pivot point. So my elbow is placed on the desk, my wrist and fingers are quite rigid, and I'm just moving in little lines, trying not to allow them to become arcs, because if you use your elbow as a pivot point, keep everything else rigid, and you draw a long line, it's obviously going to be an arc. But my lines are not long enough to become arcs, and on the rare occasions that I am using longer lines, then I will lift my elbow up and actually use my shoulder to create the lines. But most of it, my elbow is placed on the desk, and that is my pivot point. In terms of value, obviously, as per usual, the pressure of the pencil is going to create value to a large extent, as well as the density of lines. Now this is where hatching is slightly different from the drawing that we've been doing in our little drawing explorative series. A lot of the drawing that we've been doing has been the density of lines, how closely they pack together, like in the scribble drawing, or in the pointillism it was how densely or how closely packed the dots are. Now in this case we can do both. Hatching can be a combination of the pressure of your pencil as well as how close together the lines are. So there's going to be some areas in this drawing where my lines are going to be very light and further apart, because that's going to be a light value area, and there's other parts of the drawing where my lines are going to be close together to create a more mid-tone value. And then of course there's still going to be more other parts of the drawing where I'm going to actually move to a higher value pencil, and I think in this case I was using a 4B. Then I go back and add some more lines, some of them closely packed together to create a lower value of that particular value range, and then some of them closely packed together with a little bit more pressure to create the darkest of the values that I'm working with. So hatching is a combination. It's a combination of the density of the lines as well as the value of the pencil that you're using and the pressure that you're putting on that pencil. The secret with plain hatching is of course to keep the lines in a straight line. So let's move on to cross hatching now. Cross-hatching is almost exactly the same thing, except you've got the added advantage of being able to put lines in opposite directions, and in fact even in more than one direction. So I'll start off with my natural direction, which is left to right, and then I'll move my hand and go from top to bottom, left to right. And I might even go horizontal and vertical, and a build-up of the different lines crossing one another does build tone a lot quicker than straight hatching does. So I may not necessarily need to go to my deeper value pencil as often as what I might have to do with plain hatching. I also find cross hatching a little bit easier to define edges in a sense. I think it's slightly easier than plain hatching, because that jagged edge that I was talking about with hatching doesn't necessarily happen as easily with cross hatching as it does with plain hatching. But the principle is exactly the same. It's again spacing of lines, density of lines, pressure of the pencil, and different pencil values that will give you all the different value ranges. Now with both cross hatching and hatching, your lighter value areas are just going to have sparser lines with lighter value and longer lines possibly. I think also one of the things I must mention with hatching and cross hatching is that it's a good idea to keep your line soft towards the edge. So you would place your pencil and drag your line and then lift your pencil across the line so that your value is getting lighter and lighter until the line eventually disappears. If you draw lines that start and stop in a definite place, it can be just as attractive, but it takes a little bit more practice. The sketchiness of your lines, ending in a softer line, can help to describe your lighter values a lot more attractively possibly. I really enjoy the effect that plain hatching has on a drawing, because there is also movement in your drawing regardless of whether or not your subject is stationary, because you've got this diagonal movement across your drawing that is creating all the different values, as opposed to cross hatching where the movement is in many different directions which seem to cancel one another out. So in my opinion, there's a little bit less movement involved with cross hatching than what there is involved with hatching itself. So in my opinion, I find hatching incredibly attractive and quite fascinating, but I do find it probably one of the most difficult ways to draw, I will admit. Now maybe that is just a personal choice because I don't do hatching on a daily basis. I think for people that use hatching and only hatching, it might get easier with time. I do think, like everything else, practice, practice, practice. And it is possibly a case that I find it difficult because I spend more time practicing other drawing methods than I do practicing hatching. So that may well just be a personal preference. Drop me a line in the comments box. Let me know what you think of hatching and whether or not you agree. Finally, all I really want to say is that please note that hatching and cross hatching is not quite the same thing as contour and cross contour drawings. That's something that we will deal with in a separate tutorial. I have had a very brief look at it when we were doing the elements of drawing, but I don't want you to confuse hatching and contour hatching. So that's it for hatching for today in day 117. Thank you so much for joining me for this little tutorial. I hope that it has helped you in some way. Please will you drop me a line, keep me posted as to your progress, and join me again in day 118 tomorrow. And please don't forget the YouTube channel where you can go and catch up. You can of course catch up on Facebook, but the YouTube videos just seem to be a lot easier to navigate. And I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining me, folks. You guys are the best. Bye. That's what you want to do.